Good evening and welcome again to the Canadian Orthodox Monastery of All Saints of North America. I see again we have a little bit of a lighting problem, and I'm going to try to bring the lighting up a bit and see if we can maybe clear it up. But this evening, because here in the monastery we use the Slavic calendar, we celebrated the Dormition of the Theotokos last Friday. And it strikes me, there are a few things particular about this feast, but in the reading, when we read, the same one we read for the Nativity of the Theotokos, the reading about Mary and Martha, and we realize that in the reading about Mary and Martha, I've got to, stop it from restarting because of an upgrade. In the reading of Mary and Martha, we see how Martha was so concerned about much serving, and perhaps being rather fussy about it, and going too far with it, and being maybe a little concerned with her reputation, with the people who are visiting and that sort of thing. But Mary had seated herself at the feet of our Lord Jesus Christ. And our Lord Jesus Christ said that Mary had chosen the better part for herself. Well, this reading certainly applies to us as well, because it's so easy for us to find so many reasons and so many excuses for not taking time for our Lord Jesus Christ. Very few people attend a vigil on the eve of a feast, and even for regular Vespers, we see that in parishes, we have a small percentage of people who actually will take the time for that. And even of people who are able to manage to come for a great feast day, the percentage of people who might be free on a weekday feast day who actually attend the service are also, is also rather small. Of course, we're a monastery. We serve the feast days and all the services for the Brotherhood. And people do come and join us for the feast, make pilgrimages, especially for some feasts. But in general, it's so easy to find every manner of excuse to put Jesus Christ on the back burner. We have so much to do. We're so busy. We have the car to wash, the lawn to mow, people to visit. We have television programs we absolutely cannot miss. And all kinds of, the kids are playing soccer. There are so many reasons for giving up Christ for the sake of various activities in the world. And however much we try to excuse ourselves, there ultimately isn't an excuse. We can pretend, we can try to deceive ourselves, but really to become Martha instead of Mary is a great sickness for us in our era. It is a trend and a tendency of our society. We belong to a cult of convenience, and yet Jesus Christ is the only thing that appears never to be really convenient to us. He's the one that we can forget about unless we are frightened or sick or have a scare of some kind. So this reading about Mary and Martha is really a reading about all of us and the struggle that we have within us, particularly on Sundays, to come to be with our Lord Jesus Christ and listen and hear what it is that he has to say to us, instead of being troubled and busy with much serving or self-serving or whatever else it is we find an excuse to do. I also want to make a comment about two aspects of the iconography of this feast day. The iconographers and some of the pious traditions that come down to us are aimed really at showing us, again, that the Mother of God was the Ark of the New Covenant. And we have to understand this clearly in order to understand her place in our lives. The things that were placed in the Old Testament Ark, the tables of the law, the rod that budded like a living tree, the vessel of manna, the heavenly bread. All of these things are types of our Lord Jesus Christ. And those types were prophetically in the Old Testament tabernacle. So the Old Testament tabernacle itself was really a prophecy about the incarnation of God in Jesus Christ. And the tabernacle was a type of the Virgin, because in her womb she contained the reality of those things which were foreimaged in the Old Testament ark. So she truly is the ark of the new covenant. This is why we sometimes see the picture of the little Jewish man trying to turn over her bier, where she was laid out before her coffin. And this reminds us of the man who touched the ark in the Old Testament and was stricken because of it. Now, there's a pious tradition that the little man tried to push the bier of the Theotokos over, and that an angel severed his hands, but then they were healed again, as a show of the power of her intercessions. There's another mythology that I find extremely disturbing and very anti-orthodox. And that is, when we see in the icon Christ receiving the soul of his mother and carrying it heavenward, this is a part of the story of her being buried for 3 days and then her body being caught into heaven and reunited with her soul. Now, originally, that illustration was not the soul of the Virgin being carried away by Christ. In fact, it shows her wrapped for burial, being held in his arms. And originally that was meant to tell us that the whole story is she died, was buried, and that Christ carried her body into heaven. So the image of Christ holding Mary wrapped in winding sheets for burial was never intended to depict him carrying her soul away, but him carrying her body away into heaven, as the rest of the story. Now somewhere this got twisted around, that Christ came to carry away the soul of the Theotokos. And that became rather integrated, somehow even into some iconographic representations. And then a mythology developed, connected with the Gnostic fable of the Ariel toll houses, which was accepted by some very spiritual people in the church, one or two saints even, in our own time, whose theology was extremely poor. But anyway, the idea that Christ came to carry the soul of the Virgin through the Ariel toll houses because she was terrified of the demons, and the horror of the demons frightened her, so she asked Christ to come and carry her soul personally through the Ariel toll houses. Now, the idea that the Mother of God was terrified of demons or had anything to fear from demons is simply blasphemous. It doesn't matter who taught it, who believed it. It's blasphemous to suggest that the Mother of our God was terrified of demons. And if she was, why on earth would we bother to ask her for her help in our struggle against the demons in this life, the temptations that they heap upon us? This is one of these instances where the Orthodox theology is set against itself by some fabulous tale like this. Something that is so totally opposed to Orthodox theology and the revelation of the mystery of the Mother of God, as to suggest that she had to be terrified of demons and that her son had to come and help her because she was so terrified of the demons. And in the first place, the very understanding that Christ had come to carry away her soul is some innovation in that icon, which really shows Christ carrying away her body after the third day. And we have to be a little bit circumspect when we hear teachings, no matter who taught them, of this type, and think how contradictory they are to Orthodox